Hello and welcome to this channel. The Asclepius is a Hermetic treatise that was available in a Latin translation during the whole of the Middle Ages. When Marsilio Ficino translated the Corpus Hermeticum in Latin in the 15th century Florence, the West was already familiar with the name of Hermes Trismegistus, and the Asclepius was one of the main reasons why. The passage that I want to comment on now is one that St. Augustine already discussed in the 8th book of his City of God. It describes the end of the Egyptian tradition in apocalyptic terms, and Augustine identifies these events with the advent of Christianity in the land. His interpretation became almost canonical in the Christian West, so I'm somewhat reluctant to give an alternative one. My interest is also very different. What I want to know is what this fragment can tell us about our own future, and not about Egypt's past. I'm confident that my approach here and my interests are legitimate, since there's an analogy between the different cycles, and the same moments within two cycles will have much in common. Therefore, the end of a mere subcycle, such as that of the Egyptian tradition, belonging to what in classical times was called the Iron Age, or Our Age, will be analogous to the end of the whole cycle. What we face today is nothing less than the preparation for the ending of the entire cycle, with the approaching of the end of the Iron Age. The Asclepius has much to teach us about these things. I will read you the fragment first, in the 2007 translation of Clement Salaman, and then I'll make my comments going through the text again. I prefer this translation to that of Brian Copenhaver, but if you are looking for a volume for your personal use, I suggest the 1992 translation of the Hermetica by Copenhaver, that contains the Corpus Hermeticum also. Salaman's volume that I'm using here only has the Asclepius. Also, you may find online the older translation of Walter Scott. In the description box you will find a link to the transcript of this talk, and I suggest you keep in front of you the text of the fragment that I'll be commenting on. So let's see the fragment. Do you not realize, Asclepius, that Egypt is the image of heaven? Or to speak more precisely, all things which are in motion and regulated in heaven have been transferred or have descended into Egypt? More truthful still, our land is the temple of the whole cosmos. Yet since the wise should know all that is to come, it is right that you should not be ignorant of something else. A time will come when it appears that the Egyptians have worshipped God with pure mind and sincere devotion in vain. All their holy worship will turn out to be without effect and will bear no fruit, for the gods will withdraw from earth to the heaven and Egypt will be deserted. The land which used to be the seat of religion will be abandoned by the gods and become void of their presence. Not only will foreigners pouring into the region and covering this land neglect religion, but what is worse, religious duties to the gods and divine worship will be prohibited with penalties prescribed by so-called laws. This holy land, this home of sanctuaries and temples, will all be filled with sepulchres of the dead. O Egypt, Egypt, only stories of your religion will survive, and these your children will not believe. Only words carved in stone will narrate your pious deeds. Scythians, Indians, and other such will inhabit Egypt. It will be peopled by barbarian neighbors. The gods will return to heaven and abandon man, who will then all die. Thus Egypt, deprived of gods and man, will become a desert. Now I speak to you, most holy river. I tell of your future. You will be filled with a torrent of blood right up to your banks, and these you will burst through. Not only will your sacred waters be polluted with blood, but your banks will burst open and the dead will far outnumber the living. Anyone who survives will be recognized only by his language as Egyptian. From his actions one would take him to be a foreigner. Why do you weep, Asclepius? Egypt herself will be led into much worse things than these, and she will be sunk in greater evils. This once holy land, which had such great love for the gods, where alone they deservedly fixed their seat on earth because of her devotion, for she taught man religion and piety, will become an example of the most ferocious cruelty. Then to man, tired of living, the cosmos will no longer seem an object of wonder or something to be reverenced. Nothing better was, is, or ever will be seen than the goodness of this whole cosmos, yet it will become a danger and a burden to man. Because of this, people will no longer love, but come to despise it, this inimitable work of God, this glorious creation, this perfection formed with such a variety of images, this instrument of God's will, who in his work gives favor without partiality. This cosmos, a world of many forms, brings everything to unity, the unity of the all. It is a cosmos which can be revered, praised, and finally loved by those able to see it. The dark will indeed be preferred to the light, and death thought better than life. No one will have any regard for heaven, and spiritual person will be deemed mad, and the materialist wise. An angry man will be considered strong, and the most evil regarded as good. All the teaching about the soul that I have explained to you is that the soul is born immortal or expects to attain immortality. This teaching will not only be laughed at, but considered an illusion. It will be held as a capital offense, believe me, for a man to give himself over to reverence of the divine mind. New rites will be created. There will be new laws. Nothing holy, nothing religious, nothing worthy of heaven or the gods which inhabit it will either be heard or believed. How grievous will be the withdrawal of gods from men! Only the evil angels will remain. Mingling with humanity, they will force these wretches into all evils of violence, wars, robbery, fraud, and all those things which are contrary to the nature of souls. In those days the earth will not be stable, nor will the sea be navigable. Heaven will not be traversed by the stars, for the course of the stars will cease in the sky. Every divine voice will of necessity be stopped. The fruits of the earth will wither, and the land will no longer be fertile. The very air will hang heavy in lifeless torpor. Such will be the old age of the world, irreligion, disorder, and unreason concerning all that is good. When all this happens, O Asclepius, the Lord and Father, the God who is first in power and governor under God who is the One, will consider the conduct of the willful deeds of man. Through his will, which is the goodness of God, he will take a stand against these evils and against the universal corruption. He will restrain error and every malign influence. Either he will dissolve all this in a flood, or consume it by fire, or destroy it through disease and pestilence spread through different lands. Finally, he will restore the world to its ancient beauty, so that it may again appear worthy of reverence and wonder, and also that God, the creator and restorer of so great a work, may be worshipped by people, then living with continual hymns of praise and benediction. By these events the world will be reborn. There will be a return of all that is good, a sacred and spiritual re-establishment of nature herself, compelled by the course of time through that will, which is and was without beginning and without end. For the will of God has no beginning, but remains the same. As it is now, so it will always be. For the nature of God is the purpose of his will. End quote. This is the fragment in question, and if you know the text already, you may have noticed that I quoted the preceding paragraph also. The crucial piece of information there is that our land, that is Egypt, is the temple of the whole cosmos. This is what makes these predictions important for us today also. What does it mean that a particular country is the temple of the whole world? Isn't that a bit chauvinistic and exclusivist? Well, this lack of inclusivity is the hallmark of any regular tradition. Every traditional pre-modern community considers itself to be in the center of the world, where the world of the gods and the world of man meet. That is because every traditional community is ordered around a sacred center, that for that particular community is the sacred center. In traditional Romanian villages, the village itself was built within an area measured from a wooden pole in the ground. The center of the village is called the hearth of the village, just as any house has its own hearth. In fact, not only the village is an image of the ordered cosmos, and thus it is an ordered cosmos, but every house within it is an image of the same ordered cosmos. We can say that the houses are microcosms within the macrocosm of the village, and the village is a microcosm, alongside other villages around it, within the macrocosm that has its center in the capital city. Every house is a complete microcosm, but also a fragment of the macrocosm that is the village. Every village is a complete microcosm, but also a fragment of the macrocosm that is the country. There is a sacred center around which the country is ordered, just as there is a sacred center around which a village is ordered, and a sacred center around which a particular peasant house is ordered. It is the same model that gives order to the country, to the village within a country, and to the house within a village. Each one of these three in turn is an image of the whole ordered world, of the cosmos. We Romanians are anything but original in this. Quite to the contrary, this is the standard model for any traditional society, and this explains why every traditional society, without exception, from the great civilizations of China or the Inca Empire, to the most remote and primitive village, considered itself to be in the center. Every traditional society is ordered around a sacred center, so it is indeed in the center. Around this sacred center you have order and civilization, and beyond the limits of one civilization, you have the cosmic chaos, embodied in the barbarians, as the Greeks called non-Greeks, or the Mlecchas, as Indians call non-Indians. Ethnologists who went through Romanian villages to gather information about our traditional culture heard time and again stories from peasants on how strange and unsettling was for them to go beyond the village limits. They sensed that they are setting foot in a different world, and that made them feel uneasy. Nowadays all this might seem ridiculous and ignorant. Of course you should go and meet others and know cultures different from your own, and treat other cultures as at least equal to your own. You get special points if you immerse yourself into foreign cultures, because this only goes to show just how open and tolerant you are, unlike your ancestors who did not like to venture beyond the village limits without some important cause. They were provincial simpletons and narrow-minded. You are cultured and open-minded. You are a citizen of the world. Well, I would dare propose an alternative interpretation of this modern attitude of cosmopolitan open-mindedness. I would venture to say that it is made possible by the fact that modern societies are not ordered around a sacred center. They are not ordered according to the rules of sacred geography. Modern people know nothing of sacred center, so they are decentered enough to put foreign cultures on the same level as their own culture. Moderns have no idea about qualitatively differentiated space, and so the difference between cosmos and outer chaos comes to naught. Modernity is, in the literal sense, imbecile. As you may know, the Latin term imbecile refers to someone without a staff, called baculum in that language. A staff is that which you lean on to keep yourself upright. It is a fitting image of the axis mundi, and without it you will fall to the ground. Within the body, this sacred staff is the spine that allows us to keep our heads up high and look up to the heavens. Modern societies are not ordered around a sacred center, so they have no concept of space differentiated into cosmos and chaos. For our contemporary elite in academia and politics, otherness, as they call it, is something wholesome and to be embraced and celebrated. This cancellation of borders between the order space and the outer chaos is an important part of the Hermetic Apocalypse, as we shall see later on. For now what is relevant for us is to recognize that the Egyptians are perfectly entitled to consider their own country as a temple for the entire cosmos. From the particular point of view of the Egyptians, their country is in the center of our visible world, and therefore it is the earthly image of the cosmic order. That is why it is modeled after a celestial pattern, which in turn is the visible manifestation of the invisible order. The celestial pattern is the intermediary between the invisible and the earthly. Since Egypt is a traditional society ordered around a sacred center, the Egyptian civilization is a sub-cycle that reflects the becoming of the entire cycle, just as a house is a microcosm within the village and the village is a microcosm within the country, and that makes the Hermetic Apocalypse relevant for us today. The same principles that govern the end of the Egyptian sub-cycle govern the end of any other sub-cycle as well as of the cycle itself. Now let's see how this end will begin. Quote, "A time will come when it appears that the Egyptians have worshipped God with pure mind and sincere devotion in vain. All their holy worship will turn out to be without effect and will bear no fruit, for the gods will withdraw from earth to heaven and Egypt will be deserted. The land which used to be the seat of religion will be abandoned by the gods and become void of their presence." End quote. The departure of the gods represents the returning of the cosmos into chaos. What this passage tells us is that there will be, first and foremost, a separation between the earthly reality and its celestial model. In other words, Egypt will be not a cosmos anymore as opposed to the outer chaos. Religion and worship in traditional societies is about ordering the primordial chaos and about the bringing forth of the cosmos out of it. What we humans do here in the earthly domain is what the gods did at a higher level when they ordered the primordial chaos into a livable cosmos. A traditional society has as its main mission to bring into a particular world the divine ordering influences by connecting our world to the higher worlds. This connecting point is where the axis mundi penetrates our world, and that is the sacred center. The loss of the sacred center brings with it the loss of contact with the divine ordering influences from on high. This loss of contact with the cosmic ordering influences will cancel out the border in our world between the order civilization and the outer barbarity. Quote, "Not only will foreigners pouring into the region and covering this land neglect religion, but what is worse, religious duties to the gods and divine worship will be prohibited with penalties prescribed by so-called laws. This holy land, this home of sanctuaries and temples, will all be filled with sepulchres and the dead. O Egypt, Egypt, only stories of your religion will survive, and these your children will not believe. Only words carved in stones will narrate your pious deeds. Scythians and Indians or other such will inhabit Egypt. It will be peopled by barbarian neighbors. The gods will return to heaven and abandon man, who will then all die. Thus Egypt, deprived of the gods and man, will become a desert." End quote. St. Augustine and other Christian authors see here a description of the Christianization of pagan Egypt, when the tombs of the martyrs will replace the heathen temples. I think this is a complete misunderstanding of the text. The opposition between the temples and the sepulchres represent the engulfing of the cosmos by chaos, of order by disorder. This is clear from the context. Egypt was never overrun by Indians, so these, as well as the Scythians, have a symbolic function here. Both of these peoples are placed at the edge of the known world for the Egyptians, so what the text says is that the periphery will invade the center. Also, the desert represents the same outer chaos that surrounds the fertile banks of the Nile, where civilization thrives. So the desertification of Egypt is just another image to express the same thing, the cancellation of the border between cosmos and chaos. We have three sets of opposing realities here, expressing the same thing, and if we want to understand the sacred text, we have to get used to think in terms of sacred space and sacred time, not geographic space and historic time. We have temples versus sepulchres, barbarian foreigners versus Egyptians, and the desert versus the fertile Nile Valley. Once we are able to read the signs in a sacred text, we have made a decisive step towards reading the signs of the times in the events happening around us right now. We live in a decentered culture and in an imbecile civilization. This absence of a sacred center can only mean that the border between order and chaos will not be operational anymore. Just look at the fascination of our elites with otherness. Whether it is the lower strata of our societies, the mentally challenged, the weird and the queer, our official culture is fascinated by everything that is marginal. The current invasion of foreigners in our homelands, promoted by the same intellectual, political and artistic elites of ours, is just one more sign of the imbecility of Western culture, in the sense of the term that I mentioned before. The current opening of minds and borders could not happen while our culture is still the expression of the ordering influence of an ordering center. There's a Romanian proverb to the effect that a fish starts to smell starting from the head. In fact, it is precisely our elites that are the most affected by this disease, both our political leaders and our cultural betters. This is the sign that they have lost the mandate of heaven, and I mean that literally. Fidelity to these elites is treason to our civilization. To follow the current culture is to remain ignorant of our heritage, and in fact our heritage is not good anymore even for children, let alone for adults, and unjust laws undermine the values of old. We live in times when taking seriously those values of old gets one labeled un-European. Actually, those who earn the qualification of Europeans are those who betray their heritage, as the following passage foreshadows. Quote, "Now I speak to you, most holy river, I tell of your future. You will be filled with a torrent of blood right up to your banks, and these you will burst through. Not only will your sacred waters be polluted with blood, but your banks will burst open, and the dead will far outnumber the living. Anyone who survives will be recognized only by his language as Egyptian. From his actions one would take him to be a foreigner." End quote. Egypt is a country along the Nile, and this river is its lifeline. Its vivifying effect mirrors that of the world axis, along which the spiritual influences flow from on high towards the lower levels. The image of a Nile that is not vivifying anymore comes after other images that speak about a break between the world of the gods and our world. These two worlds are communicating along the world axis, so the river's troubles reflect the dysfunction of the world axis itself. Within the sacred geography of Egypt, the Egyptians themselves represent the order around the sacred center. That is what any traditional civilization is by definition. The foreigners are those who are beyond the border of this order, and they represent chaos. So when Egyptians become indistinguishable from foreigners, that means that the separation between cosmos and chaos has disappeared, and the agents of order have become agents of disorder. Currently in Europe we threw out the values that created the European miracle. In the last millennium, Europe went from being an Asian peninsula, geographically we're not a continent, to becoming the heart and mind of the world. That greatness has passed and will not come back, because we fulfilled our providential mission. But that does not mean that we should commit civilizational suicide by denying and actively stamping out our traditional values. The irony is that while our elites believe to be the prophets of an enlightened multicultural future, the text of the Hermetic Apocalypse shows us that they are just playing their predetermined role in a sad story of decay that they don't understand. In fact, it is their ignorance that permits them to play their predetermined role. For now, we still live in a kind of euphoria and hope for a bright future where people of every race, language and culture will live in harmony. But the writing is already on the wall, and as time passes, more and more people will start to see it. At one point, we will all wake up to the nightmare that we took to be a pleasant dream. Quote, "Why do you weep, Asclepius? Egypt herself will be led into much worse things than these, and she will be sunk in greater evils. This once holy land, which had such a great love for the gods, where alone they deservedly fixed their seat on earth because of her devotion, for she taught man religion and piety, will become an example of the most ferocious cruelty. Then to man tired of living, the cosmos will no longer seem an object of wonder or something to be reverenced." End quote. The cosmos that Hermes Trismegistus is talking about here is not the nature of modern environmentalists. We are not talking about the Gaia of radical ecologists. The cosmos is the ordered world as opposed to the primordial chaos whence it came. The cosmos is the universe ordered by divine power and also the human community ordered according to the same divine model. We know at least from Plato's Republic that the hierarchy of the soul's faculties and the hierarchy of the ordered society are mirroring each other, and they are both dependent on the cosmic order as it transpires from the Timaeus. This cosmological dialogue of Plato's is of course a continuation of the Republic. So what is the thrice great talking about here? As a traditional civilization ordered around a sacred center, Egypt is about connecting this world to higher worlds along the world axis. That way the ordering influences are spread in our world and chaos is transformed into cosmos. This is the religious influence that we are reading about here, and when that ordering effect ceases, people will turn into barbarians. It is a characteristic of decenter people that they resent the proper order and they perceive it as something oppressive. They do not recognize the beauty of an ordered cosmos, because there's an analogy between the ordering of the soul and of society. A disordered soul will work against the ordered society, and once society lacks proper divine order, it will enforce the disorder in the soul of the people. This is what we have today, and this is why more and more people feel alienated from an ordered society. Having lost the contact with the world of the gods, whence the proper spiritual influences are coming to order our world, they don't recognize its importance. People with disordered souls will organize society in such a way as to make sure that the gateway to the gods is no more. Quote, "All the teaching about the soul that I have explained to you is that the soul is born immortal or expects to attain immortality. This teaching will not only be laughed at, but considered an illusion. It will be held as a capital offense, believe me, for a man to give himself over to reverence of the divine mind. New rites will be created, there will be new laws. Nothing holy, nothing religious, nothing worthy of heaven or the gods which inhabit it will either be heard or believed." End quote. The attitude of the new regime will swing between ignoring the old ways and actively persecuting those who are still attached to some aspects of it. There's a problem, however, with ignoring transcendent realities. Our visible world is a mediating level between the higher worlds and the lower ones. Our world is not the lowest in the hierarchy of being. Another thing to keep in mind is that the lowest levels of the cosmic order correspond in our world to the periphery. We have already seen that the loss of contact with the divine leads to the breaking down of the separation between the ordered world and the outer chaos. So the influx of barbarians is an image of the opening of the gates of the underworld. At the end of the cycle, this gate will be really opened, and the infernal influences will come forth. Quote, "How grievous will be the withdrawal of gods from men! Only the evil angels will remain. Mingling with humanity, they will force these wretches into all the evils of violence. Wars, robbery, fraud, and all those things which are contrary to the nature of souls. In those days the earth will not be stable, nor will the sea be navigable. Heaven will not be traversed by the stars, for the course of the stars will cease in the sky. Every divine voice will of necessity be stopped. The fruits of the earth will wither, and the land will no longer be fertile. The very air will hang heavy in lifeless torpor." Again, we should resist the temptation to interpret these last lines from the perspective of modern environmentalism. What we have here is quite different. The images of cosmic decay come in here to signify the severed relation between humans and our world. When we humans do not fulfill anymore our roles as priests and mediators, the world that we live in falls into decay and becomes uninhabitable for us. We are not there yet. The demons have not come up yet from the underworld, and our world is still inhabitable. The technological infrastructure that we built lately is still in place and working. We have some way to go until we reach the end. And time has not ceased. As you see, the heavens are still revolving. But if you listen up until this point, I trust that you have a better idea about how to orient yourself in these trying times. The Hermetic Apocalypse ends, as any apocalypse should, with a restoration, but that is still far and will happen only when the humans will have decayed so much that only divine intervention will be able to save us. At this point, there's still some good in the world, and there's still duties for us to fulfill. If you found this video informative, please give it a thumb up and share it with your friends. If you have observations to make, or you think that I glossed over something that should have been said, or you think that I'm simply wrong, share that in the comment box.